And I'm not, you know, in our group, Brian Edwards Tegert was the treasurer for the board, and he was much more up on this than I was. All I know are a few things. First of all, he got his budget on time, presented in the July meeting of the LSB. We, of course, have not gotten a budget yet this year, and the other group is in charge of the budgeting process. So the other thing is that there was he recognizes that there was a proposal for $400,000 in cuts for the staff, and that was held up the year before by Grace Ahrens, who is associated with that group, and you know, that's what we were told. Now, they had plenty of time to look at these budgets, and there are other things, but like I said, I'm not the right person to deal with this because this is not my area, but I do think that what Tracy has been saying should be dealt with by Brian, because this is very much at odds with what our information is. And the big problem is what are we going to do about it? We're getting less and less money coming in. We have a board that's spending all of its time passing proposals to give it more power in managing the station, rather than going out and getting the progressive community to recognize it has to make a sacrifice to save KPFA. And we really need a whole new organizational output from the station and the board, or otherwise we're just going to shrink this thing away to nothing.
I haven't been involved in this process at all, although I certainly have been involved in budgets and nonprofits, and I know the problems that come with that. And I just want to say that I agree with Matthew that what we need to talk about how to overcome the problem. There is some debate about the question of whether or not the station's listenership has fallen off. It's my understanding that more ballots went out in this election than in the previous election, and I'd appreciate, that's not true. Fewer ballots went out?
We're opposite last year. It's about 20% down.
20% down from 3 years ago. Okay, so the listenership is holding steady, but that listenership is not giving as much money as it has in the past, and that's clearly a reflection of the economic problems that are faced by the entire society. So I think we need to talk about how to do two things: increase listenership and increase subscribership. That is, get more people of the many people who listen to the station to become subscribers and to become regular supporters. And I have some ideas about how to do that, and I also have some contacts in the nonprofit community who I think would be willing to help us figure out how to do that.
Okay, I attended the sessions where they voted on the budget, and I do know that the Voices for Independent Media did challenge Independent Slate, or whatever it was, ICR did challenge the budget, but in my view, I mean, they didn't say we're going to make a public issue of it, and they didn't vote no on it. That's when I saw that was what I think was required. Now the question, and the management did not carry out the cuts. Now our view is that if you don't have the income, if you don't have the revenue, you have to cut the budget, and that you have to do it by seniority. And what's happened in our view at KPFA is that people have been laid off outside of seniority. Other people have been hired at KPFA, and new programs have been started outside of seniority. That's a violation of, I think, union contracts. If you're going to have layoffs, which I'm against in general, I'm against laying people off. They have to pay their bills. But when you have layoffs, you do it by seniority. That's not taking place, and there's not a transparent process in the management. As a matter of fact, Amelia Gonzalez, around the layoff or the cutting of time of one programmer on Flashpoints, Nora Barrow-Friedman, was laid off. Her hours were cut 50%. Other hours of other workers who'd been just hired did not have their hours cut. So it's political retaliation in our view. That's what's going on. There has to be transparency. You have to follow a contract. You have to have a good process. But that doesn't, the other issue about whether KPFA will survive. We believe that KPFA will survive and Pacifica will survive, but it can't survive by paying staff if it doesn't have the money. It means community producers. That's what you have to do. If you can't have paid staff, you have to have community producers. This is a community radio station. That's what it is. So those people who are arguing that KPFA will be destroyed unless we get $4 million or $1 million, no. There are many community radio stations all over the country that do programming 24 hours a day with community programmers, and they don't have a budget of $1 million. KPFA actually and Pacifica are in better shape than many stations. They own the building. They own a lot of resources. So in reality, Pacifica and the stations are in good shape. They're running a deficit, and you have to cut that deficit. And I agree with those who have said we have to have a plan to build up the stations. We have to have a plan for new programming to win the audience that's left. Many people have left and go to KALW, go to Green 960, and they're going to those stations. They're not listening to KPFA. It's not relevant to them anymore. We have to change that dynamic. And that means new voices, new programs. We have to use KPFB to have new programs and have that on the internet as well. This means we have to have an activist station. What I've said in the past, for example, as far as building listenership, you want to talk about building listenership. There was a rally of 5,000 workers at UC Berkeley, largest rally, and KPFA was not there covering it live. In the 60s and 70s, they would have covered that rally live, and it would have reached all over the country. Thank you.
So there is, you know, there has been cutbacks in hours and layoffs at the station. There's not been a solid process by which, you know, any set process by which this happens. Letters to Washington came on, and there's no real process by which that came online. And there's other situations. And I also wanted to add a little aside comment. The other day I was listening to the morning show, and Brian Edwards-Tiekert and Amy Allison went on the air and put about a minute of kind of an appeal to the audience. They mentioned that their hours were being cut, and they kind of pointed the finger at the management. I think that that's really inappropriate, especially during the times of elections, and especially given that the concerned listeners / Save KPFA have made it such a talking point in their rhetoric to talk about your favorite programmer's hours being cut and talk about how this is the result of management, new management, they say. And then you have coinciding Brian Edwards-Tiekert, a prominent voice on KPFA, and Amy Allison saying, our hours are being cut. If you notice that I'm not on the air, it's because new management has cut our hours. I think that kind of seems to tag team with one particular slate, and I think it skates on thin ice in terms of just going right up to the edge of, like, you know, of inappropriateness or violating the local station board elections policies. I just want to throw that out there.